There are 8 different types of female sex drive. Women aren't just horny or frigid or total sluts or perfect Christian good girls. Women are much more complicated than that in terms of sexuality. There is a spectrum, plus there are types of sex drives that aren't anywhere on the spectrum. And if you understand these 8 different types of sex drives, it's going to really help you avoid a lot of problems in your life in terms of having relationships with women, because most men are completely ignorant about how women actually get horny or whether or not they get horny or when they get horny. Now, first off, women's sexual desire is cyclical. Sometimes they're horny, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they go through horny periods of their lives. Sometimes they go through periods of their lives where they don't want to have sex at all. Sometimes they go through periods of their lives where they want to have sex with one guy. Sometimes they have periods where they want to have sex with many guys, usually when they're much younger. This is very different than men. Men, as you know, because you're probably a man watching this video, we're horny all the time. We're very consistent. On that bar chart, it's a straight line. We're consistently horny all the time. Now, some men are more horny, some men are less horny, but our horniness doesn't really fluctuate, not that much. Whereas with women, it fluctuates all the goddamn time. It can fluctuate several times a week, several times a month, and actually throughout the years, throughout her life. So even though I'm giving you the 8 types of sex drive, be aware that women change over time. This is one of the reasons that long-term monogamous marriage doesn't work. When you marry her at age 26 or 23 or 31, she's going to be radically different in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years. Just be aware of this. The first type of feminine sex drive are zero sex drive women. These are women who literally never have sex, and they literally never want to have sex. Now, these women fall into 2 categories. One, these are women who are going through a temporary phase of their life where they just don't want to have sex with any men whatsoever. Usually these periods don't last longer than about a year and a half, but sometimes these things happen. That's unusual. The more common category of a zero sex drive woman are women who are older, well over the age of 65. Most women over the age of 65 just don't want to have sex anymore. And the reason for that is, unlike men, women need to feel sexy in order to enjoy sex. So if you're a woman well over the age of 35, do you feel sexy? Probably not, which means you have no interest in sex. And many older men in that age range who date women or have been married to women in that age range will tell you this. Once a woman hits around age 65, and it varies per woman, it's not always 65, but once a woman hits this point later in life, 60s, 70s, what have you, she's just done. She's done having sex because she doesn't view herself as a sexual creature. Now, this is the opposite of us guys, right? You can feel completely unsexy. A guy can be fat, disgusting, dumpy, ugly, hairy, cigarette hanging out of his mouth, drool hanging out of his mouth, and he's ready to have sex and he'll enjoy it a lot. Doesn't matter for us guys. That's why in some respects it's much more simple to be a man. The bottom line is zero sex drive women find sex as something that is something they don't want, something that is kind of useless. And if you ever run into a woman who is either older or going through this temporary phase of her life, you should just move on. She is not interested. Now, if she's a younger woman going through this temporary phase, you can circle back to her in a year or 2 years when she's back to normal. But right now, she's not interested. Move on. The next category of feminine sex drive is repressed women. These are women who have suffered some sort of trauma, often a sexual trauma, but not always sexual, at some point in their past. So they are sexual creatures. They do want to have sex sometimes. They can enjoy sex, but in order to get to sex with these women, you're gonna have to work very, very hard. You have to build up a lot of trust. You'll have to be very patient. During sex, you're gonna have to take things very slow and very gentle. These are the kind of women that might cry in the middle of having sex because they're dealing with past trauma. It could be an RAPE in her past. Maybe she was beaten by her dad. Maybe she had a horrible divorce or a horrible breakup with a boyfriend. Maybe she had some other traumatic event that somehow affected her sexually. Who knows? The point is that for whatever reason, she is now sexually repressed. She can have sex, and it is possible, but you're gonna have to be patient. Unlike the zero sex drive women, she can have sex, and she might be open to having sex with the right guy, but she's gonna be very picky about it, very slow to get there, very nervous about it, and you're gonna have to be super patient. And if you don't want to engage that level of work or patience, you're welcome to move on. And again, many of these women over time kind of cure themselves. They get over it and they get to a more normal range. Some of them never do. It really depends on the woman and it depends on the level of trauma. Whenever you run into these women, by the way, be nice, because whatever happened to her in her past usually wasn't her fault. So be nice, be understanding, be cool about this, be empathetic, don't be a dick, but just realize what you're dealing with. The next category of feminine sex drive is low sex drive women. These are women who are perfectly normal. They are not zero sex drive women. They have sex and they enjoy sex. They are not repressed. They don't have any past traumas, or at least not any serious past traumas. They're just not into sex. That's just not important to them. If they have sex every once in a while, they're fine. If they find themselves going without sex for 6 months or a year, they're perfectly fine. They really don't care. And if they meet a guy they like, they'll start having sex again. And maybe when the relationship is new, they might be having a lot of sex. But within a few weeks, they'll be back to having sex once a month, once every other month, and they're perfectly fine with that. These are women who tend to have less aggressive, more mild personalities, more even-keeled personalities. They tend to be either submissives or independents when talking about the 3 types of women. And by the way, if you don't understand or didn't know about the 3 types of women, I suggest you watch that video right there. It discusses the 3 types of women: submissives, dominants, and independents. There are some dominant, low sex drive women, but they are very rare. Matter of fact, I don't think I've ever met one. They are out there, but low sex drive women tend to be submissives or independents, not really dominants. Many low sex drive women tend to be hardcore provider hunters. They tend to have a lot of Disney fantasies. They tend to dislike dating. And often you will find these women already pair bonded to a boyfriend or husband, almost always a submissive beta male, because those guys don't need to have a lot of sex either. The next category of feminine sex drive are slow sex drive women. Not low sex drive women, slow sex drive women. These are very interesting. And they're not the norm. They're reasonably rare, but they're out there. And these are often mistaken for low sex drive women, but here's how they work. They're not initially horny. They don't act horny. They don't approach men for sex. They will not try to have sex with you. They will not demonstrate any horniness. And they will seem like low sex drive women. Once you start having sex with them, though, all of a sudden they light up like Christmas trees and they love it. So once they're having sex, they get very horny. But when they're not having sex, they're really not that horny. This is very different than low sex drive women who enjoy sex a quote normal amount. So slow sex drive women are not sexually aggressive at all. They might have some level of ASD. And if you don't know what ASD means, that's anti-slut defense. That's that thing inside women that tell women to not have sex with a new guy because he might think I'm a slut. And so they may behave like women who aren't into sex, but they are. You just have to get them warmed up. And often these women take a little more time to warm up sexually, but once they're warmed up, they're monsters. They're sex beasts and they love it. And perhaps even over time, if you know how to make her feel good, she will start wanting to have sex with you more often. But it's going to take time because they're slow. The next category are normal sex drive women. These are the norm. This is the female baseline. The majority of women will fall into this category of a normal sex drive. And here's how women normally are. Men are horny. Women are horny when they're horny. Let me explain what that means. As I said earlier, you as a man, you're horny pretty much all the time. If you have a bad day, if you have a good day, if you're in the middle of work, if you're in the middle of watching a movie, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're horny. And you're down for sex pretty much all the time, unless you have some kind of testosterone problem or you're suffering from a trauma or something like that. That's an exception to the rule. But generally speaking, most men are horny all the goddamn time. Right? Right. It's a standard part of being a man you have to learn to deal with. Women are not like this. Standard normal sex drive women are not like this at all. When they are not horny, they're not horny at all. So when they're focused on something else, they're not thinking about sex. They don't give a shit about sex. They're not horny whatsoever. If you were to approach a woman right when she's in the middle of a project, an art project or work project or taking care of kids and say, hey, let's have sex, she'll be like, what the hell is your problem? She doesn't want to have sex at all. She's focused on something else. However, as I said at the beginning of this video, women do get horny. And when they get horny, they get really horny. Now, sometimes she'll be horny when she wakes up in the morning. Sometimes she'll be horny when she goes to bed. Sometimes she might get horny in the middle of work. That happens. And I have found, this is just my opinion based on my experience, I'm no psychologist, but I believe that when women get horny, they're actually hornier than men are. I have talked to hundreds of women about these topics, and I have heard all kinds of stories about how when women suddenly get horny at work, they have to excuse themselves and go to the bathroom and take care of themselves with their fingers so they can get back to work. This is the norm for women. They're not horny, but when they get horny, they're very horny. They need to be satisfied, and then they're back to normal, meaning they're not horny again. Again, very different than a man, and it's very difficult for men to understand how this works. But that's the bottom line, and that's how this works. Now, normal sex drive women are not high sex drive women. A normal amount of sex is perfectly fine. Once a week, twice a week, a few times a month, perfectly fine. However, if they go 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months without having sex, they're usually okay. They might have a vibrator, they might have other options, but they're usually okay. It's not like they freak out like men do. In other words, the sex drive of a woman is much more malleable and flexible than a sex drive of man's, which is consistent all the time. The next category in terms of feminine sex drive are high sex drive women. These are our favorites, and unfortunately they're reasonably rare, but they're out there. These are women who are horny all the goddamn time, almost like a man. And they're wonderful. However, this is something men don't understand about these women. That doesn't mean they will pick up their phone, swipe through Tinder, immediately find a guy and go jump on his cock. They still are women. They still need to be comfortable having sex. They will still have some level of ASD, especially if they're over the age of 33. All the normal rules still apply. I'm just saying that they need sex much more frequently, much more often, and in some cases more intensely than the typical average woman. These are women who get pissed off if they don't have sex every week or close to it. Again, kind of like a man. These are the kind of women where if they text you and they want you to come over to have sex and you say you're busy, they actually get mad at you and give you drama over the phone because they need your cock and they need to get laid. Now, these women often find themselves in odd scenarios. For example, if you have a high sex drive woman who is over 40, her ASD is sky high, which means she just can't go to a bar and hook up with a guy like a 23-year-old woman would. So she has to actually go for certain men that she is already very comfortable with and have already vetted. And if those men aren't available, she gets mad because she can't have sex with anyone. So you can have women who are very, very horny, very, very high sex drive, who still have sky high ASD and aren't going to just go jump on a guy's cock. Now, this obviously would not apply if the woman is young. There are women out there who are 19, 20, 20-year-old girls who have high sex drives, and these are women who are extremely promiscuous. Their ASD is lower, so they will go out and bang tons of dudes, and sometimes they'll do it in inappropriate ways, dangerous ways, promiscuous ways, but there you go. By the way, whenever you're hooking up with a high sex drive, younger woman, be sure you're wearing a very good condom. Very important. High sex drive women will demonstrate certain behaviors based on their current relationship models. Some high sex drive women are basically the female version of players, and they will date lots of guys, have sex with lots of guys, much more men when they're younger, smaller number of men when they're older, but it'll still be multiple men. Women who have boyfriends who have high sex drives, they will be fucking their boyfriends all the time, and they will also be cheating on their boyfriends. Women who are married, who are high sex drive women, will marry a guy, they'll fuck the shit out of him for a while, then they will get bored and they will quickly divorce that guy so they can get more sexual excitement and sustenance somewhere else. Many, many high sex drive women tend to be serial monogamists. They get one boyfriend, fuck the crap out of him for 6 months, a year and a half, dump him instantly, immediately go get a new boyfriend, do the same exact thing, and they just do that for years and years and years. I personally know many women in this category, hardcore, high sex drive, serial monogamists, new boyfriend every year and a half to 2 years or less, and that's just the lifestyle they lead. Most high sex drive women orgasm during sex very easily. As a matter of fact, my theory is that the easier a woman can come during sex, most women can't come very easily during sex. It requires the man to do a bunch of things to get her to come. But the easier she can, the more promiscuous and horny she tends to be because she's more like a man. Because do you need a lot of work to come during sex? No, you don't. You're a guy. So that's why they become more masculine in their sexual patterns, because sex feels much better to them than the typical woman. As you might expect, many high sex drive women of all ages have difficulty navigating society because society, including left-wing society, looks down on these women for several reasons. And so often they have to pretend to not be high sex drive, or they have to hide it, or they have to rationalize it, which is difficult emotionally on them. So some of these high sex drive women, God bless them, live some difficult lives because they have to navigate through a world where people look down on women who have high sex drives. The next category of female sex drive is sex as attention women. Now, these women are often mistaken for high sex drive women, but they actually aren't. These are high sex drive women's dysfunctional sisters. These women have sex often, but they have sex for completely different reasons than high sex drive women. High sex drive women have a lot of sex because it feels good, because they like sex. Sex as attention women are very different. They have a lot of sex, just as much as high sex drive women, sometimes even more, because they crave that level of attention from men. As I've written about in my books, including The Unchained Man at alphamalebook.com. The number one thing a woman wants from a man is what? Is it money? No. Is it love? No. Is it sex? No. It's attention. And sex as attention women have learned that the highest form of attention they can possibly get from a man, the most intense, undivided attention she can command from a man, is while a man is actually having sex with her. So these women will have sex with a lot of men or have a lot of sex because they love the attention they're getting during the sex. It's not necessarily that they like the physical act of sex. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, maybe they like it a little bit. But the reason they crave sex so often is because they want that attention. They want to see that man stare into their eyes and totally focus on them and talk dirty to them and give them that level of attention that they may be missing for some reason in other areas of their lives, either because of personality issues or past traumas or what have you. Obviously, to have sex just because you want attention from men is not super healthy. So these women tend to have a lot of problems in life. They tend to be promiscuous. They tend to be extroverted. They tend to be reckless. They tend to make a lot of bad decisions with men and dating and relationships and sex. And they often tend to have a lot of drama in their relationships. These are also the type of women who really enjoy things like role play during sex, BDSM, crazy sexual positions, and other things like that, which means, yes, these women tend to make great FBs, to be honest, truth be told. But just be aware of the issues these women have and why they're having sex with you. Some guys will have sex with these women, these sex as attention women, and think that the women are really into them, the man, when in fact she's into the attention she's getting from the man, not necessarily the men. These are also women who cheat a lot when they get into monogamous relationships, and the younger they are, the more often they're going to do that. The last category of feminine sex drive are sex addicts. And this is really not a type of sex drive. I'm just including this here for the sake of completeness. Sex addicts are actually very rare. Many people in society think the world is full of sex addicts. That's not true. Sex addiction is a very specific condition. Sex addiction does not mean you like having a lot of sex, or you have a lot of sex, or even if you have a lot of sex with a lot of people. That's not sex addiction. Sex addiction is not the normal, healthy sexual desire that human beings have. Instead, it is actually a dysfunctional clinical condition. Sex addicts feel awful. They feel terrible when they're not having sex. And so they go have sex to feel normal. You and I, normal human beings, have sex because it feels good. Sex addicts have sex to feel normal again, just like a drug addict, just like an alcoholic. The reason a woman or male sex addict has sex is to relieve a pathological psychological obsession. It's to relieve themselves so they can feel normal again. And actually, they don't really feel normal, they feel bad, because once they have sex, the normal feeling doesn't last very long and they jump and have sex again. Sex addicts, when they're men, for example, are the kind of guys who they will go have sex with like a 70-pound crack whore. They'll go have sex with a 500-pound woman. They don't care. They don't care what the person looks like. They don't care what the sex is like. Same thing with female sex addicts. They just need to get that dysfunctional relief. And it is a horrible dysfunctional condition. A woman who is a sex addict needs hardcore psychotherapy immediately. But again, I want to reiterate, just because she is a high sex drive woman or sex as attention woman, or if she's promiscuous, does not mean she's a sex addict. That is a very weird, isolated, rare category of both men and women. I talk about these topics several times a week here at this channel. If you enjoyed this video, you could subscribe to this channel, leave a like on this video, leave a comment on this video, and click the notification bell so you get more of these videos in the future. If you would like to watch a video on how to make sure a woman doesn't have power over you in a relationship, you should watch that video right now, and I'll see you in that video.